One rain-soaked night in Chicago can change everything. For Elisa Vance, a 23-year-old waitress drowning in debt, life was invisible. She was nobody, but when she found a terrified, well-dressed boy collapsing in a dirty alleyway, she didn't call 911. She dialed the only number in his pocket. She didn't know she was waking up the devil. She didn't know that by saving the son of Dylan Moretti, the city's most feared capo, she was signing away her freedom. One call, 5 words. "Your son is dying here." And the war began. The Chicago rain felt less like water and more like ice shards against Elisa Vance's exposed neck. It was 2:30 a.m., the hour when the city stopped pretending to be civilized and revealed its teeth. Elisa pulled her thin, thrift store cardigan tighter around her chest, her non-slip waitress shoes squelching against the oil-slicked pavement of Fifth Avenue. Her shift at Sal's Diner had been brutal. 8 hours on her feet, $40 in tips, and a manager who tried to dock her pay for a broken plate she hadn't even dropped. She was tired in her bones, the kind of tired that sleep didn't fix. She turned the corner onto a narrower street, a shortcut to her basement apartment in the crumbling tenements of the South Side. The streetlights here were yellow and buzzing, casting long, sickly shadows. That was when she saw the heap of black fabric near a dumpster. Elisa paused, her heart skipping a beat. It looked like a discarded coat. Then, the coat moved. "Help!" a voice whimpered. It was small, too small for this part of town. Elisa rushed forward, dropping her tote bag. Lying in the puddle, curled into a fetal ball, was a boy. He couldn't have been more than 7 years old, but he wasn't dressed like the kids from her block. He wore a miniature tailored suit made of expensive wool, though it was now soaked and mud-stained. His hair was slicked back, but messy, and his face was terrifyingly pale. "Hey, hey," Elisa whispered, kneeling in the filth. She touched his forehead. He was burning up, yet shivering violently. "Can you hear me? Where are your parents?" The boy's eyes fluttered open. They were a striking, piercing grey, eyes that looked too old for such a young face. "Can't walk," he wheezed, clutching his stomach. "Legs numb." Elisa's nursing school training, abandoned 2 years ago when the tuition money ran out, kicked in. She checked his pupils, dilated. His pulse was erratic. "I'm calling an ambulance," Elisa said, reaching for her cracked smartphone. "No!" The boy's hand shot out, gripping her wrist with surprising strength. Panic flared in his eyes. "No hospitals. Papa said, no hospitals. They'll find me." "Kid, you're sick. You might be hurt," Elisa argued, her voice trembling. "Phone," the boy gasped, reaching into his blazer pocket with a shaking hand. He pulled out a sleek, matte black device that looked like it cost more than Elisa's entire year of rent. "Call Papa. Only Papa." He thrust the phone at her, then his head lolled back. He was fading. Elisa looked at the boy, then at the empty street. If she called 911 and he was a runaway or involved in something illegal, social services would take him. But if she didn't get help, he might die right here in the rain. She took the black phone. There was no passcode. The screen lit up with a single contact, saved simply as the architect. She pressed the call icon. 1 ring. 2 rings. The line clicked open. There was no hello, just a silence so heavy it felt like it sucked the oxygen out of the air. "Who is this?" The voice on the other end was a low baritone, calm but vibrating with a lethal undercurrent. It wasn't a voice you interrupted. Elisa swallowed hard, her throat dry despite the rain. I found a boy," she stammered, hating how weak she sounded. "He's about 7, dark hair, expensive suit. He's on the corner of 5th and Ridley. He fell. He says he can't feel his legs." The silence on the other end lasted for 3 seconds, but it felt like an eternity. She heard the distinct sound of glass shattering in the background, as if a tumbler had been crushed in a bare hand. "Is he breathing?" The voice was no longer calm. It was sharp, urgent steel. "Barely. He's burning up. He told me not to call the police," Elisa said fast. "He said to call you." "Listen to me very carefully," the man said. The menace in his tone made Elisa want to drop the phone and run. "Do not move him. Do not hang up. If you leave him, I will find you. If you let him die, I will find you. Stay exactly where you are." "I'm not going anywhere," Elisa snapped back, her exhaustion overriding her fear for a split second. "He's a child. Just get here." 3 minutes, the man said. The line went dead. Elisa stared at the phone. 3 minutes? In this traffic? She took off her cardigan and wrapped it around the boy's shoulders, pulling him onto her lap to keep him off the freezing concrete. "Hold on, okay? Your dad is coming." "Luca," the boy whispered. "My name is Luca. I'm Elisa. Stay with me, Luca." Exactly 2 minutes and 45 seconds later, the atmosphere on the street changed. The rain seemed to be drowned out by the roar of engines. 3 massive black Cadillac Escalades tore around the corner, ignoring the one-way sign. They screeched to a halt in a V formation, blocking off the street completely. The headlights were blinding, turning the dark alley into a stage. Doors flew open in unison. 6 men in dark tactical gear poured out, weapons drawn but held low. Elisa froze, shielding Luca's body with her own. "Don't shoot!" she screamed. Then the rear door of the middle vehicle opened. A man stepped out. He didn't run, he stalked. He was tall, over 6'3", wearing a charcoal 3-piece suit that fit his broad shoulders like armor. He didn't have an umbrella, and he didn't care. The rain plastered his dark hair to his forehead, highlighting the sharp, aristocratic jawline and the cruel, beautiful mouth set in a grim line. This was Dylan Moretti, the Don of the Chicago outfit, the man the newspapers called the Untouchable. He saw Elisa on the ground, holding his son. For a second, his grey eyes, identical to Luca's, met hers. Elisa felt a jolt of electricity that was pure, primal fear mixed with awe. Dylan dropped to his knees in the mud, ruining pants that cost thousands. He ignored Elisa entirely, placing a large hand on the boy's cheek. "Luca," Dylan said, his voice surprisingly gentle, a stark contrast to the monster on the phone. "Luca, look at me." "Papa," Luca wheezed. "My juice. Tasted funny." Dylan's head snapped up. His eyes locked onto his head of security, a scarred man named Silvano. "Poison! Get the antidote kit, now!" Silvano sprinted to the car. Dylan looked back at Elisa. He didn't thank her. He grabbed her wrist, his grip like an iron shackle. "Did you give him anything? Did you feed him?" "No," Elisa cried, trying to pull away. "I just found him. I gave him my coat." Silvano returned with a silver case. Dylan injected something into Luca's thigh with the precision of a surgeon. The boy gasped, his back arching, then went limp. "Get him in the car," Dylan ordered. 2 men gently lifted Luca and rushed him to the middle SUV. Dylan stood up, towering over Elisa. He looked at her wet uniform, her name tag, the fear in her eyes. He wiped the rain from his face, his expression unreadable. "Get in," he commanded, gesturing to the car where they had taken his son. "What?" "No." Elisa backed away, her hands up. "I helped you. I did what you asked. I'm going home." Dylan took a step toward her. The space between them crackled with danger. "You saw my son. You know my face. And someone poisoned him. Until I know who, and until I know you weren't part of it, you belong to me." "I didn't do anything," Elisa yelled, backing into the brick wall. Dylan signaled to Silvano. Put her in the car, Silvano. Gently if she walks, not gently if she doesn't. Before Elisa could scream, Silvano had her arm. She was shoved into the back seat of the Escalade, right next to the unconscious boy. The door slammed shut, locking her in with the most dangerous family in America. The interior of the Escalade smelled of rich leather, expensive scotch, and the metallic tang of gun oil. The silence inside was suffocating, broken only by the rhythmic thump-thump of the windshield wipers fighting the storm outside. Elisa pressed herself against the door, as far away from Dylan Moretti as possible. He sat opposite her, his legs crossed, watching his unconscious son with a hawk-like intensity. He hadn't looked at Elisa once since the car started moving. He was typing furiously on his phone, his thumbs moving with lethal speed. Is he going to be okay?" Elisa whispered. Her voice sounded too loud in the quiet cabin. Dylan stopped typing. He slowly lifted his eyes to meet hers. Under the passing streetlights, Elisa saw the exhaustion etched into his features. He was terrifyingly handsome, but it was a cold beauty, like a marble statue in a graveyard. "That depends," Dylan said softly, "on how much of the toxin he ingested, and how long he was lying in that filth before you decided to call." "I called the second I found him." Elisa defended herself, a spark of anger cutting through her fear. "I didn't have to call. I could have kept walking. Most people in that neighborhood would have." Dylan studied her. He looked at her frayed cuffs, the dark circles under her eyes, the way her hands were shaking. He was dissecting her, analyzing her worth. "What is your name?" "Elisa. Elisa Vance." "Elisa." He tested the name, rolling the R. "You are a waitress? Is that a crime?" "It makes you vulnerable, Elisa. Vulnerable people are easy to buy, easy to threaten." He leaned forward, the scent of sandalwood and rain filling her senses. "Who paid you to find him? The Russians? Or was it Vinnie Santino?" Elisa gaped at him. "Nobody paid me. I was walking home from work. You think I want to be here? You kidnapped me." "I secured a witness," Dylan corrected calmly. "And perhaps a suspect." The car swerved smoothly as they exited the highway, entering a winding road surrounded by dense forest. They were heading toward the North Shore, where the old money and the secret money lived. "I'm not a suspect," Elisa said, her voice shaking. "I'm the person who saved his life." "We shall see." The convoy slowed, approaching a massive wrought-iron gate adorned with a complex crest, a lion holding a sword. The gates swung open, revealing a sprawling estate that looked more like a fortress than a home. Stone walls, security cameras on every tree, and patrolling guards with dogs. The car stopped in front of the main entrance. The doors opened, and chaos resumed. Medical staff were waiting, not paramedics, but a private team in scrubs without logos. They swarmed the car, taking Luca onto a stretcher. Dylan was out of the car instantly, barking orders in Italian. He moved with a kinetic energy that commanded the attention of everyone in the vicinity. Elisa hesitated, staying in the back seat. Maybe she could just slip away. Miss Vance, Silvano, the head of security, appeared at her door. He was a mountain of a man with a jagged scar running from his ear to his chin. "The Don expects you inside." "I want to go home," she said, though she knew it was futile. "Not tonight." Elisa stepped out into the grandeur of the Moretti estate. The foyer was breathtaking, black marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and a grand staircase that looked like it belonged in a movie. But the atmosphere was heavy with dread. Dylan was standing in the center of the hall, stripping off his wetsuit jacket and handing it to a maid. He rolled up the sleeves of his white dress shirt, revealing forearms corded with muscle and tattoos. "Silvano," Dylan said without turning around, "take Miss Vance to the blue room, lock the door, Put a guard on it. She speaks to no one. She touches no phones. Wait! Elisa stepped forward, ignoring Silvano's warning hand. You can't just lock me up. I have a job. I have a cat. I have a life. Dylan turned slowly. He walked up to her until he was inches away. He towered over her, his presence overwhelming. Your life stopped being yours the moment you answered that phone, Elisa, he said, his voice low and dangerous. If my son dies tonight, you will wish you had never been born. If he lives, we will discuss your future. He leaned in closer, his grey eyes burning into hers. Pray for him. He turned on his heel and strode toward the medical wing, the double doors swinging shut behind him. Elisa stood shivering in the hallway, wet, terrified, and angry. Silvano gripped her elbow. This way, Miss Vance. He led her up the stairs, down a long corridor lined with portraits of unsmiling men who looked just like Dylan. He opened a heavy oak door. The room inside was luxurious, a four-poster bed, a fireplace, a view of the dark grounds. But the windows had bars disguised as decorative ironwork. Dinner will be sent up, Silvano said. I'm not hungry. Eat anyway. You'll need the strength. Silvano closed the door. Elisa heard the distinct click of a heavy lock sliding into place. She rushed to the door, pounding on it with her fist. Let me out. You can't do this. No answer. Elisa slid down the door until she hit the floor, burying her face in her knees. She thought of Luca, the little boy with the grey eyes who had been poisoned. She thought of the cold, terrifying power of his father. How had a shift at Sal's diner ended like this? Hours passed. The rain battered the window. Elisa paced the room, her anxiety spiking with every minute. Suddenly, around 4:08 a.m., the lock clicked. Elisa froze, grabbing a heavy brass candlestick from the mantelpiece, holding it like a club. The door opened. It wasn't a guard, it was Dylan. He looked worse than before. His tie was gone, his shirt unbuttoned at the collar, his hair disheveled. He looked like a man who had been to hell and back. He held 2 tumblers of amber liquid. He saw the candlestick in her hand, and a ghost of a smirk touched his lips. Put that down, Elisa. If I wanted to hurt you, a piece of brass wouldn't stop me. Elisa didn't lower it. Is he okay? Dylan walked into the room, kicking the door shut with his heel. He set the drinks on a small table and collapsed into a velvet armchair, running a hand over his face. He is stable, Dylan said, his voice raspy. The antidote worked. The doctor said another 20 minutes on the street, and his organs would have shut down. He picked up a glass and downed it in one swallow. Then he looked at her. The malice was gone from his eyes, replaced by a weary intensity. You saved him. I told you, Elisa said, finally lowering the candlestick. I just found him. We found the juice box in his backpack. It was laced with ricin. Someone on the inside did this. Someone close to him. Dylan's grip on the empty glass tightened until his knuckles turned white. My son doesn't trust anyone. He wouldn't let the doctors touch him until he woke up. Do you know what the first thing he asked for was? Elisa shook her head. He asked for the pretty lady. He asked for Eliza. Dylan stood up and walked toward her. Elisa backed up until she hit the window. He stopped, leaving a respectful distance this time. My son is the heir to an empire, Elisa. He has been raised to suspect everyone. He has never asked for a stranger. Never. I just was nice to him. In my world, kindness is rarer than gold, Dylan said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a checkbook. I owe you a debt. Name your price. Student loans? A house? A new life in Europe? Tell me, and it is done. Elisa looked at the checkbook, then at his eyes. She was poor. God, she was so poor. That checkbook could solve every problem she had. But then she remembered Luca's terrified face. Papa said no hospitals. "I don't want your money," Elisa said softly. Dylan looked genuinely surprised. "Then what do you want?" "I want to go home, and I want you to promise that you'll keep him safe. He's just a little boy." Dylan stared at her for a long moment, the silence stretching between them. He seemed to be making a calculation, a decision that would shift the tectonic plates of their lives. "You can't go home, Elisa," he said finally. "Why not? You said he's stable." "Because whoever poisoned my son knows that someone saved him. You were seen on the street cameras. You are now a loose end. If I let you go back to your apartment, you will be dead by sunrise. My enemies will torture you to find out what you know, and then they will kill you." Elisa's blood ran cold. "So, what? I'm a prisoner?" "No," Dylan said. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a seductive, commanding whisper. "I have a proposition. My son trusts you. You are the only person outside of my payroll that he has let near him. I need someone to watch him. Someone who isn't one of my soldiers. Someone who can't be bought by my rivals, because she is too foolish to take a blank check." "You want me to be a nanny?" "I want you to be his shield," Dylan corrected. "You will live here. You will be protected 24/7. You will receive a salary of $10,000 a month, and in exchange, you ensure Luca eats, sleeps, and recovers. You answer only to me. And if I say no?" Dylan's eyes darkened. "Then Silvano drives you home, and I cannot promise you will survive the night." Elisa looked at the rain lashing against the window bars. She looked at the powerful, dangerous man standing before her, offering her a golden cage. She thought of her empty fridge, the overdue notices, and the lonely apartment. Then she thought of Luca. "I'll do it," she whispered, "but only until he's better." Dylan nodded once, a pact sealed in blood and rain. "Welcome to the family, Elisa." The first morning at the Moretti estate broke with a deceptively peaceful sunrise. Sunlight streamed through the high, barred windows of Elisa's room, illuminating the silk sheets she had been too terrified to sleep under. She had spent the night curled in the armchair, watching the door. At 7 a.m. sharp, the lock clicked. Elisa flinched, expecting Dylan or Silvano. Instead, a severe-looking woman in a grey maid's uniform entered, carrying a stack of clothes. "Mr. Moretti requests your presence in the master suite," the woman said, her voice devoid of warmth. "He says the boy is awake and asking for you. Wear these. Your rags have been disposed of." Elisa looked at the clothes. Slacks, a cashmere sweater, sensible but expensive loafers. It was a uniform, just a much more expensive one than she wore at Sal's diner. "I'm not a prisoner," Elisa muttered, grabbing the clothes. "In this house, everyone is a prisoner of something, Miss Vance," the maid replied cryptically before leaving. Elisa changed quickly and was escorted by a silent guard down the hallway to the east wing. This area was clearly the heart of the home. The security was tighter here. 2 men with assault rifles stood by the double doors at the end of the hall. Inside the master suite, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The room was massive, dominated by a king-sized bed where Luca sat, looking small and frail against the pillows. Dylan was pacing by the window, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in rapid-fire Italian. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week. On the bedside table sat a silver tray with a gourmet breakfast. Pancakes, fruit, eggs, completely untouched. "No!" Luca shouted, shoving the tray away. It clattered to the floor, spilling orange juice onto the Persian rug. Dylan hung up the phone instantly, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Luca, you have to eat. The doctor said your blood sugar is dropping." "It's poison!" Luca screamed, tears streaming down his face. "I won't eat it! I won't! I made the chef taste it in front of me," Dylan roared, losing his patience. The fear of losing his son was manifesting as anger. "Do not be a child! I am a child!" Luca sobbed. Dylan ran a hand through his hair, looking ready to punch a wall. Then he saw Elisa standing in the doorway. The tension in his shoulders dropped a fraction of an inch. "Handle this," Dylan commanded, stepping back. Elisa stepped over the spilled food. She didn't look at Dylan. She looked straight at Luca. The boy was trembling, his eyes darting around the room like a trapped animal. "Hey, Luca," Elisa said softly, kneeling by the bed so she was at eye level with him. "Elisa?" Luca wiped his nose. "Did Papa pay you to stay?" "Yeah, he did," Elisa said honestly. "But I would have stayed anyway to make sure you were okay." She looked at the mess on the floor. "You think the chef put something in the pancakes?" Luca nodded vigorously. "Uncle Marco gave me the juice box yesterday." He smiled when he gave it to me. "The chef works for Uncle Marco." Dylan froze in the background. His head snapped toward his son. "Marco gave you the juice?" Luca nodded, shrinking back. "Don't be mad, Papa." Dylan's face went perfectly smooth, a mask of cold fury. He looked at Silvano, who was standing by the door. "Bring Marco to the warehouse, now!" Silvano nodded and vanished. Elisa ignored the violence brewing in the room and focused on the boy. "Okay, Luca. So we don't trust the chef. Do you trust me?" Luca hesitated, then nodded. "I used to work in a diner. I make the best grilled cheese in Chicago. If I make it with my own hands, will you eat it?" "Will you taste it first?" Luca asked. "I'll take the first bite of every piece," Elisa promised. She stood up and looked at Dylan. "Show me the kitchen, and keep everyone else out of it." Dylan stared at her. For the first time, he saw something other than a frightened waitress. He saw a woman who could command a room. He nodded once. "Follow me." The kitchen was industrial-sized, gleaming with steel. The staff looked terrified as Dylan cleared the room, ordering them all out. Elisa found bread, butter, and cheddar cheese. Dylan leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching her work. It was a domestic scene that felt completely alien in his violent world. "You are good with him," Dylan observed, his voice low. "He's scared, Dylan," Elisa said, using his first name without thinking. She flipped the sandwich in the pan. "He was poisoned by his own uncle. He doesn't need a boss right now. He needs a dad." Dylan stiffened. "I am protecting him. I am destroying the threats. That's not the same thing." Elisa plated the sandwich, cut it into triangles, and took a large bite of the corner piece. She chewed, swallowed, and waited 10 seconds. "See? I'm still standing." She carried the plate past him. Dylan caught her arm as she passed. His touch was warm, sending a shiver through her that had nothing to do with fear. "Thank you," he said. It sounded like the words were foreign to his tongue. "Don't thank me yet." Elisa pulled her arm away, her heart hammering. "Just don't let your brother kill us." A week passed. The Moretti estate was a fortress, but inside, a strange routine had developed. Elisa spent her days with Luca, reading to him, playing chess, and sitting by his bed while he slept. She was his gatekeeper. No staff member entered the room without her permission. Dylan was a ghost. He left before dawn and returned late at night, often smelling of smoke and whiskey. But every night he would come to Luca's room, stand in the doorway, and watch them for a few minutes before disappearing. Then came the announcement. Elisa was in the library with Luca when Dylan strode in. He was wearing a tuxedo, looking devastatingly handsome and incredibly dangerous. "Luca, go to your room with Silvano," Dylan ordered. "But we're playing Monopoly," Luca protested. Now. Luca scowled but obeyed. Once the heavy doors closed, Dylan turned to Elisa. "Tonight is the Equinox Gala," he said. "It is held here, at the estate. Every major crime family in the Midwest will be in attendance." "Okay," Elisa said, setting down the dice. "I'll keep Luca upstairs. We won't make a sound." "No," Dylan said, adjusting his cufflinks. "Rumors are spreading that Luca is dead, that I am weak, that Marco made a move and I failed to stop it. I need to show them that my house is in order." He walked over to the desk and picked up a black velvet box. "You will attend the dinner. You will sit by Luca. You will play the role of his private governess. And you will watch everyone who approaches him." "Me?" Elisa laughed nervously. "Dylan, I spill coffee for a living. I don't know which fork to use. I can't sit with Mafia bosses." "You have instincts, Elisa. You saw what the doctors missed, his fear. You saw the danger in the alley." He opened the velvet box. Inside was a diamond necklace that glinted in the lamplight. "And you are the only one he trusts." "I'm not wearing that," she whispered. "You are. You belong to the Moretti family now. You must look the part." 2 hours later, Elisa looked in the mirror and didn't recognize herself. A team of stylists, brought in blindfolded, had transformed her. She wore a floor-length gown of midnight blue silk that clung to her curves like a second skin. Her hair was swept up in an elegant chignon, exposing the diamond necklace that rested cold against her throat. She looked like a queen. She felt like a fraud. There was a knock on the door. Dylan entered. He stopped dead in his tracks. His grey eyes raked over her, starting from her heels and travelling up to her eyes. The air in the room suddenly felt very thin. "You look—" Dylan trailed off. He cleared his throat, his expression tightening. "Adequate." "High praise," Elisa retorted, though her face flushed. "Come. The wolves are waiting." The ballroom was magnificent, filled with people who dripped wealth and danger. Men in tuxedos discussed territory disputes over champagne. Women in couture gowns laughed with sharp, predatory smiles. Elisa sat at the head table, Luca on her right, Dylan on her left. Luca looked terrified, gripping Elisa's hand under the tablecloth. "Chin up, Piccolo," Dylan murmured to his son. "Do not show fear." The dinner was an agonizing affair of 7 courses. Elisa felt eyes on her constantly. She recognized some faces from the news, politicians, judges, and known criminals dining together. Halfway through the main course, a man approached the table. He was older, with silver hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. This was Salvatore Rossi, the head of the rival New York family. "Dylan," Salvatore boomed, "and young Luca, a miracle to see you upright. We heard you had fallen ill." "Don't believe everything you hear, Sal," Dylan said smoothly, swirling his wine. "My son is strong." Salvatore's eyes slid to Elisa. He looked her up and down with crude appreciation. "And who is this lovely creature? I didn't know you had remarried, Dylan." "This is Miss Vance," Dylan said, his voice dropping an octave. "My son's governess." "A governess?" Salvatore laughed, leaning in close to Elisa. "A waste of beauty. Tell me, sweetheart, when you tire of babysitting, give me a call. I have a penthouse in Manhattan that gets very lonely." He reached out to touch Elisa's bare shoulder. Before his finger could graze her skin, Dylan's hand shot out. He grabbed Salvatore's wrist, twisting it just enough to cause pain without making a scene. "Touch her," Dylan whispered, a smile on his face that was purely terrifying. "And you will lose the hand, Sal." The music seemed to stop. The entire table went silent. Salvatore pulled his hand back, his face reddening. "Just a joke, Moretti. No need to be so possessive over the help." He walked away. Elisa's heart was pounding in her throat. She looked at Dylan. He wasn't looking at Sal. He was looking at her, his eyes dark with a possessive fire that made her knees weak. "Eat your steak, Elisa," he commanded softly. Suddenly, Luca squeezed her hand. Hard. "Elisa," he whispered. "That man. The waiter." Elisa looked up. A server was moving toward their table with a bottle of wine. He was young, nervous, but Elisa noticed something else. He was wearing heavy, steel-toed work boots under his dress slacks. Waiters didn't wear work boots. They were heavy, clunky, and loud. And his right hand was trembling as he reached into his apron pocket, not for a corkscrew, but for something metallic. Elisa didn't think. She reacted. "Get down!" she screamed. She shoved Luca's chair backward, toppling him onto the floor, just as the waiter pulled a suppressed pistol from his apron. Thwip, thwip. 2 bullets tore into the upholstery where Luca's head had been a second ago. Chaos erupted. Screams. Shattering glass. Dylan was moving before the second shot hit the chair. He vaulted over the table, a knife appearing in his hand from nowhere. He tackled the waiter, driving him into the ground with bone-crushing force. Silvano and the security team swarmed the room, weapons drawn. "Nobody move! Secure the exits!" Elisa was on the floor, shielding Luca with her body, glass shards digging into her bare arms. I got you, she whispered to the sobbing boy. Dylan stood up, dragging the would-be assassin up by his collar. The waiter was unconscious, blood streaming from his nose. Dylan looked at the chaos, then at his son on the floor. Then he looked at Elisa. She was bleeding from a cut on her arm, her hair wild, her dress ruined. But she hadn't run. She was covering his son. For the second time, she had saved the heir to the Moretti Empire. Dylan walked over, ignoring his guests, ignoring the rival bosses. He knelt down and pulled Elisa and Luca up. "Silvano," Dylan barked. "Take the boy to the panic room." "No!" Luca clung to Elisa. "I want Elisa." "She's coming with us," Dylan said. He scooped Elisa up into his arms, bridal style. "I can walk," Elisa protested weakly, adrenaline crashing. "Be quiet," Dylan said, pulling her against his chest. He carried her out of the ballroom, past the stunned crowd. As they entered the secure elevator, the doors closed, shutting out the noise. They were alone. Dylan set her down, but didn't step back. He trapped her against the wall of the elevator, his hands on either side of her head. He was breathing hard, his composure shattered. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice rough. "Waitresses do not spot assassins. Waitresses do not react faster than my security team." "I told you," Elisa breathed, looking up into his intense eyes. "I notice things. When you're poor, you have to watch everyone. You have to know when trouble is walking in the door." "You are trouble, Elisa," Dylan murmured, leaning his forehead against hers. "You are the most dangerous thing in my house." "Why?" "Because I saved him." "Because," Dylan whispered, his lips brushing hers, "you are making me feel things I thought were dead." The elevator dinged. The moment broke. But the air between them had changed forever. It wasn't just a job anymore. It wasn't just survival. It was war. And Elisa was right in the center of the battlefield. The panic room was a masterpiece of paranoia, a steel-reinforced bunker buried 30 feet beneath the wine cellar. Walls lined with screens displaying every angle of the estate, a separate oxygen supply, and an armory that could supply a small militia. Dylan set Elisa down on a leather sofa. She was shaking, the adrenaline of the ballroom fading into a cold shock. Luca scrambled onto the seat beside her, burying his face in her ruined silk dress. "Stay here," Dylan commanded. He went straight to the console, his fingers flying over the keyboard. "Silvano, status report." Static hissed through the speakers. Then a voice cut through. But it wasn't Silvano. "Silvano can't come to the phone right now, brother. He's having a disagreement with a bullet." Dylan froze. His reflection in the dark monitors was a mask of pure rage. Marco. The waiter was sloppy. Marco's voice sneered through the intercom. "I hired cheap help, but it doesn't matter. The guests are being escorted out. The police are on my payroll. And you, Dylan, are trapped in a steel box." "You think a door can hold me?" Dylan growled, checking his gun. "I don't need to hold you. I just need to wait. I cut the external ventilation. You have about 3 hours of oxygen in there. When you suffocate, I'll drill the lock and mourn my tragic brother and nephew who died in a security malfunction." The line clicked dead. Elisa looked at Dylan. "He's going to let us suffocate." Dylan didn't answer. He walked to the armory wall and pulled down a tactical vest, strapping it over his tuxedo shirt. He grabbed a heavy assault rifle and a backpack, filling it with ammunition and cash. "There is a secondary exit," Dylan said, his voice calm, calculating. "My father built it during the Prohibition. It leads to the drainage tunnels that empty out into the river, 3 miles north." He turned to Elisa. "It will be wet. It will be dark. And if they catch us, they will kill us on sight. Can you move?" Elisa looked at the gash on her arm. She ripped a strip of fabric from her dress and tied it tight. "I'm not dying in a box. Let's go." Dylan pushed a hidden panel behind a bookshelf. A damp, dark tunnel gaped open, smelling of mold and earth. "Luca, climb on my back," Dylan ordered. The boy obeyed, wrapping his arms around his father's neck. Dylan looked at Elisa. "Stay behind me. If I shoot, you drop. Understood?" "Understood." They descended into the darkness. The tunnel was a nightmare. Water dripped constantly, and the ground was slick with century-old slime. They moved in silence, the only light coming from the tactical flashlight mounted on Dylan's rifle. After an hour of trudging through ankle-deep water, Dylan stopped abruptly. He held up a fist. Elisa froze, holding her breath. Voices echoed ahead. "Check the grates. Marco said there's a tunnel exit near the river." Flashlight beams cut through the gloom ahead. 2 men, heavily armed. Dylan turned off his light, plunging them into pitch blackness. He leaned back to whisper in Elisa's ear, his breath hot against her skin. "Take Luca. Hide in that alcove to the left. Do not make a sound. Dylan, go!" Elisa pulled Luca into a small cutout in the brickwork, pressing him against the damp wall. She covered his mouth with her hand. Dylan moved forward into the darkness. He was a ghost. Elisa couldn't hear his footsteps, only the dripping water. The guards' voices got closer. "You hear something?" "Probably rats. This place is full of..." Crunch, a sickening sound of bone hitting concrete, a splash, then a choked gasp. "Hey, who's the..." Bang! A single shot, deafening in the confined space. Elisa squeezed her eyes shut. Silence returned. "Clear!" Dylan's voice rang out. Elisa stepped out, trembling. 2 bodies lay in the water. Dylan stood over them, his face impassive. He didn't look like a businessman or a father in that moment. He looked like the predator the city feared. "Take his coat," Dylan said, pointing to the larger guard. "You're freezing." Elisa put on the dead man's heavy jacket. It smelled of tobacco and rain, but it was warm. They reached the end of the tunnel. An iron grate looked out over the Chicago River. The storm was still raging outside, masking their exit. Dylan kicked the grate open, and they scrambled up the muddy bank, emerging under a highway overpass. They were out. But they were nowhere near safe. Dylan checked his pockets. "My phone is gone. They can track the GPS. The cars are compromised. My accounts will be flagged." For the first time, The billionaire king of Chicago was penniless, weaponless, save for the rifle, and on foot. He looked at the city skyline, glowing in the distance. I have safe houses, but Marco knows them all. He knows my protocols. He looked at Elisa, his eyes searching hers for an answer. He was out of options in his own world. Elisa straightened up, wiping mud from her face. She looked at the expensive suit, the tactical gear, the terrified boy. He knows your world, Dylan, she said, a plan forming in her mind. He doesn't know mine. Yours? You need a place where nobody looks for a billionaire in a tuxedo. A place where the police don't come unless there's a body count. A place where people know how to keep their mouths shut. She pointed south. We're going to my apartment. Dylan hesitated. It went against every instinct he had to take his son into the slums. But as sirens wailed in the distance, heading toward the estate, he realized she was right. Lead the way, he said. The drainage tunnel spit them out under a rusted highway overpass, 3 miles from the estate. The storm had finally broken, leaving the city slick with oil and rain. Dylan was limping, the adrenaline fading to reveal the toll of the escape. My phone is gone, Dylan said, checking his pockets as they trudged up the muddy bank. Marco will track the GPS. My accounts are frozen. The police are on his payroll. I have nowhere to go where he won't look. Elisa pulled the oversized guard's jacket tighter around her shivering frame. She looked at the billionaire king of Chicago, now covered in muck, holding his sleeping son. He knows your world, Dylan. He doesn't know mine. She led them south. They dodged patrol cars and stuck to the shadows, finally arriving at a crumbling brick tenement in the south side. Elisa fumbled with her keys, pushing open the door to her basement apartment. It's not much, she whispered, but it's safe. The apartment was a single room with barred windows at street level. It smelled of lavender and poverty. Dylan lowered Luca onto the worn, pull-out couch, covering him with a knitted blanket. Then, the powerful Don slid down the wall, collapsing onto the scratched linoleum floor. You're bleeding, Elisa noted, pointing to the dark stain spreading on his trousers. A graze from the tunnel. Elisa grabbed her first aid kit, stolen supplies from the diner. She knelt between his legs, cutting the expensive fabric to reveal a jagged gash. Dylan watched her, his grey eyes intense in the dim light. Why are you doing this? He asked softly. You could have run at the gala. You could have left us in the tunnel. I don't abandon people, Elisa said, threading a needle. This is going to sting. She stitched the wound with steady hands. Dylan didn't flinch. He just watched her face, the way her hair fell over her eyes, the determination in her jaw. I offered you a blank check, and you returned it, Dylan mused. Now I have nothing to give you, and you are saving my life again. I didn't save Luca for money. She taped a bandage over the wound and looked up. The air in the tiny room suddenly felt electric. Dylan reached out, his hand cupping her cheek, his thumb brushing away a smudge of dirt. You fight like a lioness, Elisa, he whispered. He leaned in. The kiss was desperate, fueled by survival and a magnetic pull neither could deny. It tasted of rain and whiskey. Elisa wrapped her arms around his neck, grounding him. For a moment, the war outside didn't exist. Luca stirred on the couch, whimpering in his sleep. They broke apart, breathless. Dylan rested his forehead against hers for a second before the cold mask of the Don slipped back into place. I cannot stay here, he said, his voice rough. If Marco finds this place, he burns it down. You can't go out there blind, Elisa argued. Marco has the tech. You need to know his next move. I need eyes inside. You have them, Elisa said, grabbing her cracked smartphone. "You rich guys ignore the people who serve your food and clean your floors. I know the valet at the Sapphire Club. I know the maid at the downtown safe house. We are invisible." Dylan stared at her. "You have a network." "I have friends." Elisa spent the next hour making calls. She pieced together a mosaic of information from dishwashers, drivers, and maids. By 4:00 a.m., she had the answer. "Marco is at the estate," she told Dylan. "He's throwing a victory breakfast at 7:00 a.m. for the captains. He's going to announce that you and Luca died in the storm." Dylan's jaw tightened. He is gathering the leadership to solidify his coup. "And," Elisa added, "the delivery trucks for the catering arrive at 6 a.m. I used to drive for that company. I know the schedule." Dylan stood up, testing his injured leg. A reckless plan formed in his eyes. "If I walk into that room alive while he is announcing my death, his power crumbles. But I can't get past the gate." "I can," Elisa said, pulling an old grey uniform from her closet. "I'm driving you in. Elisa, if this goes wrong, you die. If this goes wrong, we all die," she replied, tossing him the keys. "Get in the truck." The white delivery van rattled toward the service entrance of the Moretti estate as the sun began to bleed over the horizon. Elisa gripped the steering wheel, her baseball cap pulled low. In the back, amidst crates of champagne, Dylan Moretti was crouched inside a metal warming cart, an assault rifle across his chest. They reached the checkpoint. 2 of Marco's mercenaries stepped out. "Delivery," Elisa said, trying to sound bored. "Pastries for the boss." "You're not on the list," the guard frowned. "Open the back." Elisa's heart hammered against her ribs. The guard threw open the rear doors. He scanned the trays of fruit, the boxes of croissants, and the large stainless steel cart pushed against the wall. "What's in the cart?" the guard asked. "Hot plates," Elisa lied effortlessly. "You want me to open it and let the heat out? The new boss wants his quiche warm, right?" The guard hesitated. He didn't want to be the one to ruin breakfast. "Go ahead." Elisa drove through, exhaling a breath that felt like it had been trapped for a lifetime. She backed up to the kitchen loading dock. The kitchen was chaotic. She wheeled the heavy cart into the walk-in pantry and locked the door behind her. "Clear," she whispered. The lid flew open. Dylan emerged, suit rumpled, but eyes blazing. He checked his weapon. "Stay here. Do not come out until the silence returns." He kissed her hard, a promise of return, and slipped into the hallway. In the grand dining room, 20 captains of the Chicago outfit sat around the mahogany table. Marco Moretti stood at the head, raising a glass of mimosa. "Gentlemen," Marco said smoothly, "we gather in tragedy. My brother Dylan was stubborn. His weakness led to his death in the storm last night, and the death of poor little Luca." Murmurs went around the table. "Nature took them," Marco lied. "But the family must survive. I humbly accept the burden of leading us." A touching speech, a deep voice boomed from the doorway. "But you forgot the part about the poison." Every head snapped up. Dylan stood in the doorway. He looked like a wraith, mud-stained and terrifying. Marco dropped his glass. It shattered on the floor. "Dylan, how? You thought a tunnel could kill me." Dylan walked into the room, ignoring the stunned captains. "You thought you could poison my son and take my seat." "He's lying," Marco screamed, panic cracking his voice. "He's compromised. Guards, kill him." 4 mercenaries stepped out of the shadows, guns raised. Dylan didn't flinch. "Any man who fires a shot at me dies today, and his family dies tomorrow." The mercenaries hesitated. They looked at the legendary Don, then at the sweating usurper. They lowered their weapons. "I said kill him!" Marco shrieked, reaching for the pistol under his jacket. Dylan was faster. He drew his handgun and fired a single shot. Bang! The bullet shattered Marco's hand. He screamed, dropping his gun. "That was for the poison," Dylan said calmly. He took another step. Bang! The second shot took out Marco's knee. He collapsed, writhing on the Persian rug. "That was for the tunnel." Dylan stood over his brother. "And this is for making me walk in the rain." "Wait," Marco sobbed. "We're blood." "You stopped being my blood when you touched my son." Bang! The room went deathly silent. Dylan turned to the table, holstering his smoking gun. He looked at the captains. "Does anyone else wish to challenge my seat?" One by one, the men stood up and bowed their heads. "Long live the Don," the oldest captain murmured. Dylan turned and walked out, straight to the pantry. Elisa was waiting, holding a paring knife. She dropped it when she saw him. "It is finished," Dylan said, pulling her into his arms. 3 weeks later, the waitress uniform was in the trash. Elisa sat on the terrace of the estate, watching Luca play fetch with a new puppy. The boy was healthy, his laughter ringing across the garden. "He looks happy," Dylan said, joining her. He wore a simple black sweater, the weight of the world lifted from his shoulders. "He is," Elisa smiled. "He asked if I could teach him to make grilled cheese." Dylan sat beside her, taking her hand. On her finger sat a diamond ring, a promise of a future. "You know," Dylan said, looking at her with warm grey eyes, "I never believed in fate. I believed in strategy. But now, I believe in wrong numbers." Elisa laughed, leaning her head on his shoulder. "I should have just called 911. I'm glad you didn't." Dylan kissed her temple. They watched Luca run in the sun, the waitress and the Mafia Don, rulers of a kingdom saved by a single phone call. "So," Elisa asked, "what's for dinner?" Dylan smiled. "Whatever you want, my queen, whatever you want." And that is the story of how one wrong number changed the fate of the Chicago underworld. It's crazy to think that Elisa could have just kept walking that night. She could have ignored the boy in the alley and gone home to her safe, quiet life. But she didn't. She chose to act, and in doing so, she found a family she never knew she needed. What would you have done in Elisa's shoes? If you found a child with a phone that said, "The Architect," would you make the call, or would you run the other way? Let me know in the comments below. I really want to read your theories. If you enjoyed this story of danger, romance, and karma, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a new story. We have a crazy revenge drama coming up next week that you won't want to miss. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.